Moderation in all things is not always the prudent course. Moderation in all things is an incorrect understanding of the philosophy of Epicurus. When studying the philosophy of Epicurus, it is important to take note of a common yet incorrect way of understanding the ethics of Epicurus. If you do a Google search and type in, "Did Epicurus advocate moderation?" you will find that there are some websites that say this. The website global.oup.com says, quote, "Epicurus endorsed the view that happiness is achieved by moderation," end quote. And another website states it like this, quote, "Like Epicurus, Aristotle believed in the virtue of moderation in all things," end quote. Errors such as these can occur as part of a tendency to push the self-help aspect of Epicurus through the use of catchy ideas that are simple to convey. But saying that Epicurus advocated for moderation is incorrect and leads to a misconception about what Epicurus actually taught. The idea of moderation is vague, and it does not touch on any detailed evaluations required for making thoughtful choices that lead to the best long-term results. The modern concept of moderation has roots primarily in Aristotle's golden mean. In his work, Nicomachean Ethics, Book 2, he posits that moral virtue lies between the two extremes of excess and deficiency. For example, courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. As for the exact phrase, moderation in all things, it was first found in English literature in the works of Samuel Croxall, an English writer and clergyman, in his book Fables of Aesop and Others, published in 1722. For our current conception of moderation, we can also turn to the online Cambridge Dictionary, where it states, quote, "Moderation is the quality of doing something within reasonable limits. You can eat whatever you want as long as it's in moderation," end quote. This presents moderation as a kind of self-restraint or self-discipline against excessive consumption. And it also holds the idea that just having a little bit of something somehow makes it okay. Yet the conception of moderation within a given situation is itself dictated by social norms and opinions, which are often shifting and changing, and its cognition is often brought about from appearances of what is considered moderation in the eyes of others. It can become like a platitude or an abstract virtue which is not based on an individual's perceptions of pain and pleasure or unique personal circumstances. And choices can sometimes go in the wrong direction when moderation is the goal or when actions are chosen according to a vague idea of moderation, leading to unwanted or unpleasant outcomes. Moderation is highly subjective. What one person considers moderate might be excessive or insufficient for another, leading to poor decision-making or judgment. What is moderate in one situation might be extreme in another. For example, moderation in exercise for an athlete might be seen as excessive by someone completely sedentary. Underestimating harm could occur regarding one's health, such as moderation in diet regarding sugar intake for a pre-diabetic, or in substance use like alcohol or smoking, all of which might still lead to health issues over time because moderate consumption is still harmful. So we can see that this vague attitude of moderation in all things is not a good way to make choices due to its potential to lead to bad outcomes. It also misses one of Epicurus's most important concepts, the importance of how nature's primary goal is to seek happiness and health through pleasure as well as the avoidance of long-term pain, which is most accurately referred to as the use of prudence. Our current usage of the word prudence, according to the Cambridge Online Dictionary, is, quote, "behavior that is careful and avoids risks," end quote. But we will need to go back to its more ancient usage and meaning as it was understood as practical wisdom, as represented by the Greek word phronesis, signifying the ability to make sound judgments and take appropriate actions based on knowledge, experience, and careful consideration of specific situations, essentially acting with foresight and reason in everyday life. The philosophy of Epicurus gives guidance for making prudent choices. We can find throughout such sources as the Principal Doctrines, the Letter to Monosius, the Vatican Sayings, and Cicero's On Ens Torquatus section that Epicurus advocated for making prudent choices. By using sound judgment in practical matters as Epicurus presents it, we can arrive at the best outcome for a pleasant and happy life well lived. Pronesis is the ancient Greek word for prudence, and we find it used in the letter to Monosius. Of all this, the beginning and the greatest good is prudence. Wherefore, prudence is a more precious thing even than philosophy, for from prudence are sprung all the other virtues, and it teaches us that it is not possible to live pleasantly without living prudently and honorably and justly, nor again to live a life of prudence, honor, and justice without living pleasantly. For the virtues are by nature bound up with the pleasant life, and the pleasant life is inseparable from them. Prudence is practical wisdom, which can be developed and used to bring about a pleasant life. We can also see how in Cicero's On Ens, the Epicurean spokesman Torquatus speaks about wisdom. Yes, just as we regard with favor the physician's skill, not for his art's sake merely, but because we prize sound health, and just as the pilot's art is praised on utilitarian and not on artistic grounds, because it supplies the principles of good navigation, so wisdom, which we must hold to be the art of living, would be no object of desire if it were productive of no advantage, but it is in fact desired, because it is to us as an architect that plans and accomplishes pleasure. It is worth pointing out here that another common misunderstanding of the philosophy of Epicurus is the idea that we should seek to avoid all pain, and that Epicurus advocated for the avoidance of all pain. But this is not true and must be guarded against, and we can see this brought up in the letter to Monosius. And since pleasure is the first good and natural to us, for this very reason we do not choose every pleasure, but sometimes we pass over many pleasures when greater discomfort accrues to us as the result of them. And similarly, we think many pains better than pleasures, since a greater pleasure comes to us when we have endured pains for a long time. Every pleasure then, because of its natural kinship to us, is good, yet not every pleasure is to be chosen, even as every pain also is an evil, yet not all are always of a nature to be avoided. Also found in the texts is the advice that pain is to be endured in certain circumstances, to experience a greater pleasure, to avoid a greater pain, for the sake of friendship, and even sometimes one may die for a friend, referenced in Vatican Saying 57. Here are some further guidelines that can be found in the teachings of Epicurus. Pursue all desires which result in pleasurable and pleasant results, but sharply reject those which are harmful. This means that if a much worse pain will be the result, then we avoid doing that action or making that choice. Keep in mind the body's natural desires. These occur due to natural bodily enjoyment and the natural urge to avoid pain. Fulfill these as much as you like, as long as they don't result in bad consequences, as found in Principal Doctrine 8. And in Vatican Saying 21, we must not force nature, but persuade her. We shall persuade her if we satisfy the necessary desires, and also those bodily desires that do not harm us, while sternly checking those that are harmful. Fulfill your natural and necessary desires. If we do not get these fulfilled, it can lead to pain in the body or disturbance of the mind, because these are necessary for health, for the happiness of the soul, and to maintain life itself. We may at times need to engage in actions which cause pain in the short term in order to avoid much worse pain in the future. Identify your natural and unnecessary desires. These desires occur due to natural attraction to bodily enjoyment, but if they are difficult to get fulfilled, then we can make a choice not to pursue them, and we don't have to feel badly about not having them, because not having them doesn't result in pain in the body or bad health. It is important to see that these desires only fall into the category of unnecessary when they are difficult to get and don't cause pain when unfulfilled, or when they cause a much worse pain to arise as a consequence, as found in Principal Doctrine 26. Dismiss any unnatural and unnecessary desires. Desires for great wealth, power, or fame. These come about through empty opinions, and there is no end to these unquenchable desires. Vatican Saying 71. Every desire must be confronted by this question: what will happen to me if the object of my desire is accomplished, and what if it is not? Remember the following 3 points. Number 1, not choosing all pleasures and not avoiding all pain, but carefully choosing to pursue those desires which have the best long-term outcome. Number 2, choose pleasure when it doesn't result in pain or distress. Number 3, endure what needs to be done, even if uncomfortable in the short term, in order to avoid a worse pain or to gain a greater pleasure, for the health of the body and the happiness of the soul. In conclusion, Epicurus taught the use of prudence in making choices and avoidances. Prudence is the ability to use reason to think through and imagine what is involved in particular pleasures and pains, and make predictions about what kind of outcomes will result. You need to decide what to pursue and what to forego, and you need to decide what pains to endure and what pains to avoid. It is important not to be distracted by vain opinions regarding pleasures that are neither natural nor necessary, and to remember that nature readily provides the means for satisfying the desires that are most necessary for a healthy body and a sound mind.